何よ。合図はまだよ。
動きを止めておくのがプロの仕事だ。
それがCP9 のやり方か。
読みがいいな。その通り。
Welcome back to Nico Robin Character Analysis Series. This will be the 5th part of the Water 7 series, which is almost sort of devolved into a Water 7 arc analysis damn near. But this and Enies Lobby are the two arcs where it's absolutely important to go through everything as much as possible. But with this part and part 6, it'll be very different how I'll do this. Part 5 will go up, and then within the same week, part 6 will as well. This means that the upload times and when these two go up will be a lot longer than normal, but these two parts kind of go hand in hand very well together. And I think the best approach is just to separate them because combined it would be almost an hour long. And in a way you'll be getting more videos. So thank you for being patient with all this, but it'll definitely be worth it because the subject matter and just everything to discuss just in these few chapters is just monumental. At least it is to me. So enjoy this somewhat kind of double feature. Chapter 343 cuts back to Robin and the Bear-Masked Man as they are surrounded. They have their backs literally up against the wall. I kept saying Panda Man when it's really a bear mask. That's what the One Piece wiki says at least. The anime portrays it more as white or a whitish type of color, so maybe that's where I was confused. And also volume 36 literally has his mask being brown, so I should have made that connection sooner, but I just thought to correct myself now. The first thing to point out is basically the very first panel of this chapter. Robin's seen huffing and puffing just ever so slightly, and we can tell that's the case by a small puff of air beside her, and with her mouth being slightly open I think illustrates that point a lot more, while the other guy isn't having such issues. Which I think tells us that this person is running at a very fast pace, and Robin is having just a little bit of a problem keeping up. Not by a whole lot, because obviously she's not completely exhausted or winded, but it's subtle enough to point out. Oda uses a similar puff of air later in the arc, which I think this is a detail to show that they're slightly winded, so this puff of air seems to be pretty consistent with that. The guy in the bear mask begins to take something out and people begin to shoot. A giant piece of cloth covers the two as they disappear. How they escape that situation will become clear soon. Now that the two are no longer out in the open and inside the mansion, I suppose this would be the most appropriate time to mention it, but I do like how Robin is shown never harming the Carpenters during this process. Oda is treading a very fine line here, and I feel like if we got shots of Robin harming people, then it'll really make her more cold and ruthless and make it that much harder to redeem her. It does tell you that she is complying with them, but isn't going to harm innocent people, which I feel like is a subtle detail to point out. She obviously could have when they were cornered up against the wall, and she's certainly no stranger abusing her powers on a group of people like what she did in Alabasta, for example. Knowing with how her power works, that as long as she can see them, she can use her arms like what she did to the bird in Jaya. So that could have easily happened here, but she chose not to, which I very much appreciate. We see the other masked figure on the rooftop from the last chapter easily dispatching the Carpenters with no problem. The big takeaway is one says that they are strong and uses a whip and ran through the air. And we literally see them jumping around in midair as they use their Vine Whip. Which I'll go on record saying I love CP9's abilities, since they are just so cool, and to see them on screen is just really badass looking. We cut back to Polly, and a few things we learn is that they come from the shadows, which is what Kokoro stated earlier. And the Agents of Justice line feels similar to when they were talking to Robin about this being a mission for justice. Ironically, both these lines are being said by the same person, which is another clue that this is Lucci here saying that. He reveals that this is an undercover intelligence agency, Cypher Pol Number 9, which is the first time we hear the full name of CP9 since it was abbreviated beforehand. We get the idea that many people have been killed, or not, as they play it off as they don't really think about those trivial details, which shows how ruthless and deadly this group is, which there's just something about how calm and quietly they murder is just so unnerving. They're just so nonchalant and casual about all of this. It's just another day for them. And to think that this is what the Straw Hats are going to have to deal with later, and they are just absolutely no joke. Polly thinks this is no longer a genteel as an assassination, which genteel is another word for polite or respectable, as he realizes there is more to it than he thought, and probably at this point assumes that the Straw Hats have no part of this. His reply to Polly's comment angers me in the best way possible just because it's just full of BS. Clearly they know what they're doing and intend on doing more than just getting Iceberg's item. And since Polly knows what they're after, they're gonna have to kill him because of that. Robin finds the wall outside Iceberg's room, which naturally confirms Robin knows the layout of this mansion very well as stated earlier. The guy tells her to push and she begins to literally go through the wall as his body acts like a door for Robin to walk in. And he can close the door and the wall goes back to looking normal as if nothing was tampered with. Iceberg says that they startled him. He knew they would come, but never from there. He questions, Did they use the same means as yesterday? He doesn't remember being a door there. The Bear Mask Man points a gun at Iceberg and reveals it's the power of the door fruit. However thick the wall, whatever he touches, it becomes a door. As long as there is a wall, he can get in and out of everything. So with this revelation now, we can break down some things I hinted at. But I can really go into detail with it now. The guy that came across Robin earlier with the long hair and the Bear Mask guy are the same person. It's never made outright clear, but their outfits are the same with the checkered pattern and the necklace. He just swapped out his face mask. I think it shows how thorough they are in being hidden that they don't reuse the same mask twice, as he was the only one shown out in public, at least in this case shown here. I suppose it does make you question if he went out and got a new mask for himself, why he didn't do that for Robin, but it seems like he just didn't care to do that for her and didn't bother to. The other thing we learned during this is that we know exactly what his powers are, and I think this officially confirms it in the story, how Robin and this person vanished when Sanji saw them earlier. As they hid in the building nearby, he can make things into a door as long as a wall exists. His powers expand further than even just this mere concept, as we'll see later. I could see how all this may be confusing in the manga, like who is exactly who, and there might be some people just genuinely confused if this person with the long hair and the bear mask are two different people. But I think the clues here are enough that it's just one person. The anime does make it much more clear just hearing his voice, but that's a whole other topic for when I do the anime side things for Water 7. It does lead to question how the first night of the attempted murder on Iceberg went. It does seem to imply that the same method of using the Bear Mask guy's door ability of getting into his room was used on the first night, as it was in the second night. But I think how Iceberg reacts to this on the second night shows that on night 1, he didn't see this with his own eyes and maybe assumed that they got through possibly the door or another means. But based on the investigations, none of the locks in the office were forced open, so no one could have gotten in from the outside. So we can rule out that idea that they barged into the room on night 1. So it's obvious the method they used on night 1 is the same as night 2. And it just so happens Iceberg got to see it this time around, and we as an audience get to see how they got in as well. After the Bear Man explains his powers to Iceberg, he shoots him. Robin is shocked and says that there hasn't been a signal yet. For Robin to be surprised by this is telling for how brutal and violent this group is, and it truly is a case of Robin not knowing how exactly this group fully operates. Naturally, she was anticipating him to shoot him when there was a signal, whatever that signal was supposed to be or look like. Which a lot of this I think stems back to working with Crocodile and other organizations and doing as she's told, and just overall being used to following orders. For the most part, the whole in-group thing's a different story, but when she's on their ship, she tells them that she's not on an assignment, so she has no reason to fight them. Which I think that line here very well indicates that she's just very used to taking orders, or as she would call it, taking assignments. But generally, as far as we know, she's used to kind of just taking orders and following them to the fullest. Which I think is just another hint of what her life was sort of like, or just the very vague implication that for a big portion of her life, she just wasn't given a choice to pursue things that she wanted to at her own leisure. But this level of brutality by CP9 should raise an eyebrow even if Robin is surprised by this, which she is absolutely shocked when the gunshot is fired. Obviously that speech bubble isn't geared towards the Bear Mask Man, clearly it's not in a position of Iceberg, so that exclamation point definitely has to be for Robin. Iceberg writhes in pain as the Bear Mask Man says that he isn't harmless if he has the energy to talk, just as famous chefs are careful to prepare their ingredients in advance. This line is just so cold sounding, and I really like to think that this chef metaphor is something Sanji would gravely disagree with in this phrase being the way it's used here. He goes on to say it's only professional of them to restrain him and keep him from acting against them unexpectedly before the signal. Iceberg questions if that's the CP9 way, as Robin lifts off her mask, and he says it's a good guess and that he's right. There's just this odd air of how matter-of-fact they go about shooting Iceberg with no remorse and how this is all business as usual for CP9. These villains, and again I keep repeating it, are ruthless, and the fact that this is what the Straw Hats will go up against really sets these people apart from the previous villains that they encountered. This time they are fighting the world government's secret agency. It's another tier of drama that this arc has, and just knowing that these are villains who murder the innocent if they are in the way, and they clearly don't care if the signal was used earlier was loud, brash, and sent carpenters flying who aren't part of their mission, but they don't care about them in any way. It's really what I feel to be the darkest group of villains up to this point in the story in my opinion. And just for a reminder, this is the world government. This is supposed to be the good guys, the paramount of justice and righteousness. So to know that they are doing some shady, underhanded tactics is pretty disturbing. Now, Robin lifting up her mask after Iceberg saying that this is the CP9 way after shooting him to restrain him to keep him from acting up is telling. It may be a case of me giving an irresponsible assumption here on my part, but with everything in One Piece, there is a reason for something being structured in the way that it is. And it has to be for some kind of reason. For Robin to take off her mask after Iceberg's comment at that specific point can mean Robin is showing that she is not like CP9 in how they think and she does not agree with this method. And she wants to reveal herself to him to emphasize that point. What she doesn't say says a lot, and all we get is an exclamation point after what Iceberg says. But it's one of those cases that's up to interpretation. Which is what makes One Piece very fun, because Oda put forth such an absolutely insane amount of effort in humanizing the characters, and Robin is just so interesting in and of itself, so it makes guessing what's going through a character's mind, especially Robin, who can at points doesn't really say a whole lot, which makes it fun in guessing what she's thinking. But that's how I feel about it. It could be as something so simple as she had no need to hide herself from him anymore, because he's gonna die anyways, which could be a possibility. I think the most simplistic interpretation is that as soon as she takes her mask off, she does that right after Iceberg pretty much says that this group is CP9, so she may think to herself that keeping the mask on doesn't matter anymore. And obviously none of CP9 cared that she did that. So that could be the reason, as it's just the most simplistic way to look at it. Deep down, I think that Robin feels bad Iceberg has to die in order for her wish to be fulfilled, and really dislikes this level of torture Iceberg is enduring. She likely thought they would give them the signal to kill him, and that would be the end of it, in one fell swoop. The quick and painless approach, more or less. But this inhumane torture is just too far, even for someone like Robin. There really was no need to shoot him here. Considering Robin's power, she could have just restrained him right then and there, and that would have been the end of it. There wouldn't be a need to shoot him. To see him in agony like this and falling off the bed, I'm sure is enough to sell this point of pain that he's going through, which I feel Robin does not take any joy in this incredibly tough decision she has to make going through with this. Iceberg says that he's done something terrible to the Straw Hat Boy. He wasn't part of this. I'm happy Iceberg realizes now what really is going on before they even reveal it to him. He knows that this is CP9 and no longer the act of pirates as he once thought, and has immediate regret accusing the Straw Hat Pirates of this crime. Once again, I think this helps to show that he's not a bad person at all, and is really just a decent guy put in an awful situation. And he genuinely believed that the Straw Hats did this since Robin was with them on this first night, which I think is a fair assumption for him to make at that point in time. And all that bad faith he might have had towards Iceberg changes dramatically here as we see him be in pain. The fact he has regret blaming the Straw Hats for this is a good way to show it. Even if they are pirates, he feels awful accusing the wrong people for this, since they are innocent. I think he also realized too Robin being associated with CP9 would mean that she's no longer part of that crew anymore. Robin says it's nothing to concern herself over, and says, "You just said you saw me last night," which was true. It's oddly dark, but somehow comforting. Robin tries to not make him worry about this detail that he accused the crew for this crime. It's like she tried to ease his pain in some way. I suppose in hindsight it's just a case of understanding what Robin's true goal is here, but what Robin says here does seem to be about as literal as possible, when she says that he saw her last night. This is the second time she mentioned it, which the first one was with Sanji and Chopper, and now the second time with Iceberg. Maybe it is meant to be taken literally that she was there last night, but she didn't really do anything. She just stood there beside the masked figure as the other guy shot him. Which the manga up to this point made it kind of vague if that was the case, but it seems like here that literally is what happened. Anime makes that point even clearer with Robin just standing beside him. Robin mainly just focuses on the truth that he saw her last night. That line choice of, "You just said you saw me last night," I do think she's referring to he said this the night before, like what he said in the papers for example, and not exactly right now. Because there's no moment where Iceberg says that when they enter the room a second time, so that would make the most sense. Iceberg says in reply to Robin, "Was that part of your strategy too?" And the bear mask guy replies back to him. This is one of the big reveals and the reason why Iceberg survived the assassination attempt. They purposely kept him alive to pin the crime on the Straw Hats, and if they killed him sooner, they wouldn't find out the blueprints for a certain ship. Which this is the first bit of information we'll get of the thing they want from Iceberg set up in this arc. Before, it was only referred to as an "it" when they were talking about this to Robin. But this blueprint has been passed down for centuries by the wording of this statement. They anticipated that his life would be in danger after the previous night, and then trust his blueprint to someone else, and they were correct on all those fronts, and knowing it would be Paulie. I'm mentioning all this now too because it's very important. That and the lack of Robin reaction shots prove this too, showing she knows very little about this blueprint. And it all genuinely makes sense as we will go on to learn, because at this moment she's not really interested in this, but she certainly will soon enough. Iceberg figures out that everything is going according to their plan in about every aspect possible. The Bear Masked Man will leave the room to take care of the shipwrights outside the door, and he'll leave Robin to finish him off. Once they get the blueprints from Polly, they will contact them again, and when they do, Robin will take Iceberg's life. I do have to say it once again, if you're reading or watching this for the very first time, you really would believe Robin is a cold villain here just based on how she's drawn. Constantly there's cross-hatching details over her eye, and sure that could be attributed to the hoodie that she has on, but it really does a great job making her look so sinister looking. It's one of those details that kind of blows your mind later for how this is all paid off, because how is Robin ever going to be redeemed here? Just these two panels across of each other of Iceberg with this scornful, depressed look, juxtaposed with Robin's eye. It's the same eyes Iceberg recalled earlier in this arc too. There's just an added layer to all of this knowing that Robin is willing to go through with this. But in this particular moment, Iceberg really looks beyond helpless to do anything about this situation. But during this conversation, we do know at the very least when they intended to kill Iceberg. In the signal Robin expected after they get the thing that they wanted, and that they'll contact them when they got it. Robin probably assumed when they originally entered the room, they would likely restrain him, or make sure he doesn't escape, or even use her powers as I was stating earlier. But she didn't really expect him to be shot. But it's nice to know what this signal Robin was referring to earlier was supposed to be for. The Bear Masked Man's final comments here are really important to mention here as well. How CP9 thinks of what he says here about erasing Polly, since he knows the truth about them. To simply put it, both agree on the fact that Polly should die. So it does illustrate how similar their mindsets are. Him being the most satisfied that the Straw Hats will take the blame for this is a hint that CP9 had this in mind from the start. Not Robin, since not once does she make any kind of comment like this getting joy from them doing this, like what the Bear Mask guy is doing here. This was their idea and Robin went along with it. For what reason will be revealed later on, but it's just something to keep in mind. He even says this is the best part about doing all this is pitting us on the Straw Hats, which I think clues us in that they are happy to enact their plan and having someone covered for their heinous actions by blaming this on someone else since it'll make it easier on them. We cut back to the crew running. Chopper thinks Robin could be in the middle of this, but they had to proceed carefully. They theorize that knowing this is Luffy that they're talking about, he likely didn't think to sneak around the back or from the side and assumed he'd gone right to the front of the gate. All the eyes would be on him, which means the guards at the entrance will be thinned out. It'll be their chance to blend in. They jump the fence and they see that it's not thinned out at all, as they all freak out over it. We see that Luffy is stuck in between two buildings. Now, I do have to wonder how on earth this happened. We see where they were stationed at, as it was right in front of the building. The only, and I mean the only way to explain this is when he went to go off to the Galila, the wind picked him up and flew him away. So that may be the easiest explanation for it. It's a case of something stupid happening to Luffy, but this isn't really his fault. But I do think this also helps to point out how dangerous it's slowly becoming outside with the storm coming. It's possible he was just so eager to catch Robin that when he sprang into action, he didn't think and just propelled himself forward with no clear direction. We cut back to the Bear Masked Man sitting as he seemingly has killed Kaku and Lucci, as Steelstone approaches them and freaks out over their death. There's just something so terrifying that he's just sitting there in a room filled with murdered bodies waiting for someone to come by so he can eliminate them too. But I do emphasize just how brutal this group is, and it's just crazy. He's not even worried in the least bit Steelstone is there, as he focuses on completing his mission soon, and hoping it'll end already because there's just no end to this in sight, and is waiting for the signal, and the impression you kind of get from that is that it's taking longer than expected, and he's a bit surprised by that. Steelstone charges at him with his giant hammer, and he destroys it with one hand. Then he holds him, and Steelstone is shocked that he's losing to him in strength as he punches him to the ground, defeating him with ease. This is once again showing the level of power this group has, that even someone who is so physically strong looking like Steelstone was no match for him. It just keeps dogpiling the threat this group is, and another insane feat that they have is this unreal strength and beating him in one blow, as he has some kind of ability or technique, seeing that he mentioned Iron Body before he hit him. Oh, and by the way, he even knocked his teeth out, like damn. He then goes and brutally murders the Carpenters as well. I don't even think I need to explain how violent this is, like jeez. I mean, this is fucking dark, even for One Piece standards. Those people were running away from him. Clearly they had no desire to fight him, and in cold blood murders them. All these scenes are important to really show off how ruthless this group is, and it's just another case of it. Because this is just no joke, this is no game at all, they are beyond brutal. After such a violent sequence, we cut back to something a bit less intense. Keyword being less, as we see Chopper, Nami, and Zoro running away from the shipwrights as Nami questions where Luffy is, as Zoro doesn't know. He stops running and decides to charge through the front entrance as Chopper says that the shipwrights aren't the enemy. But Zoro assures him he'll be okay as he'll use the back of the swords to hit them as he mows down a group of people. With Zoro's immense strength, Nami comments that it can still kill them. It's a nice bit of comedy here just in Nami and Chopper's reaction to Zoro. It's really the only thing they can do is fight instead of running around as much. Which to be fair, Zoro did run at first, trying to not cause as much harm as possible, but he learned that eventually nothing will get done that way. That, and it looks like people will accuse them for attacking the mansion already, so there's no need to hide or run anymore. It's fitting Zoro thinks of this before Nami and Chopper as well. This also makes Zoro thoughtful in not killing them and thinking of those people's safety, even if he's still beating the tar out of them, which is another important thing to point out in the contrast of how they think of others, while CP9 doesn't. It's simple, but it's nice to see that on display. We cut back to Luffy, who gets out of being stuck in between the two buildings as he proclaims he's going to charge in this time and catch Robin as he flies off. Now, based on where he ended up here, it's why I believe the wind took him off when he went to go to the mansion originally. Though how he flies off in the way they did the first time, who's to say it wouldn't happen again? But it's really the only way to explain how he got stuck. I do like as well him saying that he's going to catch Robin, since that's really the only thing that's on his mind. That, and he's not worried about his crew as he trusts them enough. And he knows Zoro's with them, so they'll be fine. Which reminds me a lot of Skypiea when Luffy comes and sees everybody knocked out and he's surprised that Zoro's out because he really trusts him to keep them safe. Which is very consistent with Luffy's character in general. And that's where this video is going to end. I hate for it to be so short, but the next part will be a lot longer, and I think that'll be way more interesting than this one. But again, everything is so important to bring up and just talk about. This and Enies Lobby are probably the only two arcs where I'm going to go this in depth with everything as far as the plot synopsis and everything else going on with Robin, outside of Robin. Like, there's going to be some exceptions naturally, but this stuff is so important, I just have to bring up. I'm sorry that not each part we're not just plowing through stuff, but when I actually recorded this many years ago, about 4 years ago, and I kind of did just focus exactly on Robin, but I kind of missed a lot of points on just what the crew feels like, what they're going through, how it's affecting them. I glossed over all of that, so it really just cheapened, or it just didn't show everything with it, and it just didn't feel right. So I'm happy I'm able to redo it in the way that I did, because I recorded a lot of that before the first part ever came out. So that's why I wanted to do it right. I want to do it going through everything as in much detail as I could. So there's that. So I'm looking forward to the next part. That should be coming out within the week in the way that I'm structuring this, just because I didn't want people to wait like a month or however long for the next part to come out. So I want to kind of both of them be out around the same time. That and chapter 344 is just an insane chapter of just things being revealed, and there's just a lot to talk about. So, especially in hindsight, which is amazing what One Piece can do in retrospect when you go back and read it, because things connect together so well, and I'm hoping that continues for the rest of the story. It blows my mind how good how tightly everything is written. So I'm looking forward to that and everything else. So yeah, that's it. I'm done. See you all in the next video, and have a good day.